Hello, everyone. Eric Preuss with the Iowa Department of Public Health. It's about 1:31. I want to welcome you to the number 5 in a series of 6 webinars sponsored by the IPN Integrated Provider Network Problem Gambling Treatment Webinar Series. Today we have the privilege of having Allison Schwab with us, who's going to be talking about his financial legal concerns and counseling. We have a pretty good group. We got almost 50 people involved today, so that's great. It is being recorded, so please make note of that. I did just post the slides, a zip folder that has the slides and a couple of the handouts that Allison will be referencing as we go through the webinar today. With that said, we'll just go through, let you know that again, we have the webinar today, and then friends that Jerry Bauerkamp will be doing this for us on March 20th from 12 to 1:30. So if you've not registered for that, please feel free to do that. As far as for many of you, I think you're familiar now with the Zoom interface, but just for those of you who might be joining us for the first time using the Zoom interface, I've muted everyone on our end just to keep a minimum of the background noises to the minimum as possible. So if you are needing to ask a question and you've joined by computer and are using computer audio, you can use this little mute icon. It'll have a red mark through it when you're muted, and just click on that and it will unmute. If you have a question, you can certainly use the chat feature. I'll be monitoring as that we go through this. Some people are saying I'm really hard to hear, and that's because my microphone is backwards. I have to use my headset or this headset rather than my other. So hopefully that is better. So thank you. And then with if you've joined by phone, remember to use your participant ID. That helps us track you and who has joined, and also use your *6 to mute and unmute yourself if you've joined by phone. As far as CEUs, you were required to register to enter the webinar today, so we'll have that information, and we will do a poll question at the end of the webinar to confirm desire for CEUs, so that you've been in attendance for the entire time. Also, I've been getting some emails about the previous webinars, and due to the complexity of the CEUs and trying to reduce the amount of work that I'll need to do to get these out to you, I'm going to wait to send out the CEUs until after the March 20th, and so I can just send you one certificate that has the webinars that you attended, and that way I only have to send them out one time rather than 6 times for each webinar. So I apologize for some of you. You might want those earlier ones, but I think that'll hopefully be okay for everyone. If you've got something where you need to have them before then, just send an email to me and I'll do my best to assist you with that. And then, as I mentioned, we did just share the handouts via chat. I'll try and put them out there one more time as we still have people who are joining. So while Allison's go, I'll try and upload that when it looks like we've got everyone on board, because we still have people joining right now. So with that, I will move on and introduce Allison Schwab for you. Some of you have rubbed elbows with Allison in the back. It's been my privilege to work with her. Oh gosh, I think Allison since the time I took over back in 2013. So, yeah. But Allison is the treatment supervisor of the Substance Abuse Service Center in Dubuque, Iowa. She has held many different roles at SASE since her start there as a student intern in 1998. For the past 10 years, she has worked with both gambling and substance abuse patients. She has worked hard to transition all clinical staff at the substance use at SASE to work with any patient that presents with primary concerns, whether they're gambling or substance use. She has been a member of numerous work groups regarding gambling concerns in Iowa and provides trainings locally regarding substance use and gambling use disorders. She is a licensed independent social worker in the state of Iowa, and she also holds the IAADC certification. So Allison, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Eric. Just some housekeeping stuff. If you can't hear me, I tend to be a loud talker, so if you can't hear me, let me know and I can put my volume up higher. And if you ever have any questions, are we using the chat box, Eric, versus talking?
Yes, they can do both.
Okay.
I'll be monitoring the chat if they want to send questions in via chat, which is fine, or feel free to unmute yourself and jump on in with your questions.
Yes, ask questions at any time. This is something to get you started. Obviously, there's a lot to learn about finances and working with patients who gamble. So this is something to get you started with some basic information, and then hopefully we can grow on it throughout the program. So we are going to talk about the financial and legal concerns that can present for an individual or their family member, and then some of the tools that we use as clinicians to address financial and legal concerns. Where to start? So the first place to start, and this comes from Eric in the state, is going to be at the intake. I know everybody's agency calls it something different, but it would be that first time that they come in and you are looking at their financial paperwork. Things to work on with your fee contract, discussing their current income, also identifying all of their current debts. And this is something that you need to consider: who's going to be getting this information? Are they comfortable asking these questions? If you just ask the question, how much debt do you have, that can be deceiving to some people. Some patients may say they don't have any debt. Other people will list lots and lots of debt. So you have to actually go through how much of it is gambling related. You're going to want to ask about mortgages. If you don't include different types of debt, they probably won't offer that information up. How you ask the questions. Oh, that's you sharing. Thanks, Eric. How you ask the questions, the individual that you assign to ask those questions, are they comfortable asking questions related to money? We've had a lot of different agencies saying, you know, it's our receptionist or our business staff talk to people about doing their sliding fee scale. But if they are not comfortable in understanding their own finances, debt, how to have the conversation, that might be a struggle for them when they're working with a patient, and it actually can be off-putting to that patient. So those are all things to consider. During your assessment or your evaluation or whatever your agency calls it, when they're meeting with their clinician for the first time and you're gathering all the information, everything that you need to find out in order to complete all of the documentation for the state, for iSmart, is you have to ask more in-depth questions. Any overdue bills? How much of it's related to gambling? That's a very hard question to answer because they will say none of it's related to gambling, or they may say all of it's related to gambling. Asking what wasn't paid due to gambling. So did you not pay the mortgage because of your gambling? Or have you never paid this credit card because of your gambling? You have to also ask any overdue bills, everything that's due. Those can be hard. You'll tend to find that gambling patients may not even open their mail. So they may not have any idea of what their bills are. We've had plenty of times where patients would say, I have no idea, just guess. Put down $500,000 because I have no idea what I owe. All of the credit card debts, any current payday loans, personal loans, and it also includes family loans. That's one that people don't talk about a lot. If you ask them about how much debt they have, they don't typically include how much they owe their family members or their friends or their boss or their coworkers, people that they've borrowed money from. So those are all things when you're filling out whatever evaluation or assessment tool you use. But those would all be things that you have to answer, like in the iSmart data collection of all of those questions. Okay, treatment plans. Treatment planning, again, from the state, we have to identify financial concerns on your treatment plan when you're working with a patient. We took some of the ones that the state has on their website, the completing the snapshot of your average month, the self-test for financial troubles, and barriers against money triggers. Those are 3 tools you can use. What we have discussed in our agency is there's no reason that this specific treatment plan goal and objectives needs to be specific to just gambling patients. We all know that finances are a concern for everybody. So there's no reason why this can't be across the board at your agency, can't be something that's on a patient's treatment plan, is to discuss their finances. We recognize that substance use patients also don't know where they're spending the majority of their money, or they also might have concerns with paying for sessions. And so let's look at their finances. Let's look at what they're spending their money on. How much money is going to the pop machine every time they come to a treatment session? How much money are they spending on energy drinks? And so really working whether they're going to track their monthly expenses, or they're going to do their self-test for how much financial trouble they might be in, whether it's not opening their mail or borrowing money or owing people money. We have to address it during their treatment while they're here. It has to. That's one of the things the state said. So we make it mandatory that everybody has to have that on their treatment plan. You could be a lot more creative, and we'll talk about some of the other tools that you can utilize. But even something small that says that they will just do a snapshot of their average month spending, something that shows that we're looking at their finances. Next, okay. Some goals regarding finance specific. Make sure that they are under the patient's control, that they will, one would be like, I pay my monthly bills on time. Specifically, what will they do? They will actually be open and honest and speak with their wife or their husband about their debts. Being very specific with their goals, their objectives, the things that they're going to follow through with. Can you go to the next slide, Eric? Okay. Spending less at the casino each month. Obviously, we have to go with what are you spending now, and we have to figure out what that's looks like, and then what's less going to look like. Are they going to go from $100 a month to $50 a month, or does it need to be weekly for some patients? If they're working, what are they going to do with their paycheck? How is that going to be put aside? Are they going to deposit part of it into their savings account? Are they going to give their entire check to their significant other? What are they going to do? Some very specific ideas of what they're going to do with their finances. You can specify it in actual numbers. For the next 3 months, I'm going to pay creditors double monthly payments. Keep track of their spending for the next 2 months. That's a simple one. We can use the tool that I was just talking about. Tracking their spending for the next 2 months. Make sure they're in the patient's language, something that they are going to understand, something that you can ask them about when they come in for their sessions. Many times when you're working with gambling patients, there's a lot going on. And one of the last things that they're going to want to discuss is their debt, because that's a stressor and that can be a trigger for some patients. And so being very specific and saying, last time we said that you were going to pay double to your creditors for the next couple of months. How are you doing on that? What have you been able to do? How much is that? What does that look like? So you can be very specific with their goals. Otherwise, they will come in and they will sit down like a lot of patients and they will vent. They will let everything out that happened the past week. And then their time will be up and it'll be time to go, and they haven't even talked about their debt or their money or any of those issues that are really hard issues to talk about. So using any of these type of goals and objectives on your treatment planning can be very productive when it comes to the actual financial part of gambling use disorder. Obviously, in most sessions, using the tell me, expand on that, elaborate on that, and give me more detail. This actually places the responsibility on the patient to provide more information about their finances. If they say, yes, I was able to pay double on my bill the last month, and you don't ask for more information, you might not be getting the whole story. So give me more details on that. What does double look like? What does paying that debt mean to you? How did that feel when you're able to pay debt? So you have to keep asking those questions. Otherwise, like I said, talking about finances is very difficult for everybody, let alone patients that gamble. Okay, obviously discussing possible financial consequences of continued gambling. This is something that we use with any of our patients, whether it's they use substances or they gamble. What are the consequences if they continue? Are they going to lose their job? Are they going to lose their relationship? Are they going to lose their friends? Are they going to end up in legal trouble? What are the financial consequences if they continue gambling? Are they going to lose their home? Are they going to lose their retirement? Most gambling patients that come in our door here, usually something major has recently happened when they walk in the doors and recognize that they might need to talk to somebody. Whether they haven't been paying their mortgage or their significant other has found out that they no longer have a retirement, and that instead of retiring next year, they actually owe. They've taken out a second mortgage without people knowing. Something major has happened. And so if they continue to gamble, what are the financial consequences that they're going to face? Will they be homeless? Those are all things to talk with them about, to work on with their treatment plan, to work on during sessions. So when you're working with individuals who gamble, your role will be to helping them do a budget. I know Jerry, I think it was either part 1 or part 2, Jerry had talked about, everybody who is on this webinar should run their own credit report and get familiar with it and to recognize it. And I would say the same with a budget. Nowadays, everything's so easy. Most people don't write in their checkbook ledger where the money's going in and where it's coming, when it's coming in and when it's going out. And so you might not recognize where you spend most of your money. So utilizing any of the tools that IDPH has for yourself personally would be great. Just to understand that it can be hard if you're asking a patient to fill out a where does their money go for the entire month. Try and do it. I've tried it. It's really difficult. You forget to put stuff in. I'm not a big receipt keeper. So you find out real quick that if you don't keep your receipts, you might not know where your spending is going. But there's all types of budgeting tools that you can use. There are a lot online. You can use them with your bank. Mint is just an app that you can get for tracking your budget. You Need a Budget, they just use YNAB. But You Need a Budget is also something that you can do online you can just enter it in and they will tell you where you're spending the majority of your money at. The one that most people fall back on is envelopes for all purchases. And so tracking spending by using envelopes. And so you would have an envelope for bills, and you would have an envelope for food, and you would have an envelope for activities, recreation. And then you would put all your receipts for the month in each one of those envelopes. And so at the end of the month, they can sit down and go through it themselves, or you may find that patients will bring all the envelopes to you. And that's something that during your session you're going to do, and you're going to go through it and help them recognize where the majority of their money is going, and if they truly need this budget, where do they need to start making changes at? Does anybody have questions about those or other resources that they have found that are helpful? You can send a chat to Eric. No?
Yeah, Melissa, I'll just add, there are multiple other applications that can use, but it is, and again, the encouragement, and you've heard Jerry, and now you've mentioned it as well, of just, you have to be comfortable with this whole line of questioning, because if you're not comfortable yourself with how you are managing yourself financially, it's going to be very difficult to work with a patient who's struggling with their finances if you are having those same issues.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so,
Good question just came in, Allison. What if Brittany was asking, what if their spouse has control over all the money? How would we approach this regarding budgeting?
Absolutely. And I think we're going to touch on that a little bit when we talked about concerned others. Obviously, it's we would encourage the spouse to come and be a part of the treatment, whether it's to be a concerned other and have their own counselor, or just to do family sessions, couple of sessions, any of those type of things. Because if you don't have the spouse on board, it's going to be very difficult, especially if they do have control of all the money. But it has to be an open, honest conversation with the spouse regarding this. And that's a very hard conversation to have for patients. You will find that that's one of the conversations they would like to avoid, probably avoid the most, is having to get open and honest about the finances with the spouse, whether the spouse is in control of the money, or sometimes the person who gambles is in control of the money and the spouse has no idea what's going on. So again, that would be something to do hopefully in session, multiple sessions probably.
Allison, can you talk just a little bit more, and I'm glad you circled back because that was going to be my follow-up question, as to what if the gambler is the one that's in control of finances and the spouse is not aware? And you know, how do you broach that with the gambler and the shame and the guilt that may be tied to that?
Absolutely, and that's probably one of the main things that you work on, I would say, during your treatment sessions, is developing a plan of action of how to tell them. And sometimes it may start with not the spouse, it may start with a sister who's supportive, and just letting her know, listen, I've been gambling, I've been hiding it from everybody, and we're having serious financial issues because of it. And maybe the sister comes to the session and we kind of work through that together just to get them prepared for that conversation. Encouraging them to have the spouse come to the session. We want to make sure that they feel safe when they tell the individual. And it's probably going to take a long time for them to actually be open and honest about all of it. And that spouse is probably going to need their own counselor to work through their anger, is usually the biggest emotion that we see. But yeah, and those are all things to put on the treatment plan: dealing with the grief, dealing with the shame, trying to get honest. Those are all things that are very difficult. That's why a lot of times people who gamble are in treatment for so long, really, because it's a slow process. Did that answer your question, Eric?
Yes. No, thank you.
Okay.
I was seeing if anything else was coming on, and
Okay, so work with the individual to list all of their creditors. This possibly is not done in one session, hopefully it is, but doing a credit report like Jerry had recommended, Credit Karma. Maybe even just a basic plan of opening incoming mail, or mail that they could say, listen, I haven't opened my mail in 2 years, I have no idea what anything is. So encouraging them to open their mail, or to just start making, piles of their bills. And they may bring them all in. You will see an envelope come in and it'll be full of bills. And obviously none of us are actual, maybe some people are, financial counselors who have their background in finances. I do not. But just sorting and letting people know that, they have somebody to talk to about it that's not maybe a family member, so they feel more comfortable. Making piles, figuring out where everything's at, getting their credit reports. Any of those things you have to be aware of are going to increase their feelings of anxiety and guilt. If I haven't opened my credit card bill in 2 years, I can't imagine how I would feel if I was facing a stack of them to see where I'm at if I've maxed everything out, plus interest. And then once you get those kind of figured out of where they're at and what we need to start with, then it may be so much as just finding out how to limit access to money. Maybe the loved one does take over the finances, figuring out a realistic spending plan, and then even the conversation about possibly a payee. Would a payee, whether it's a family member or an appointed person, be beneficial? Some people, and you will learn, all patients, not just gambling, substance use disorder patients that I work with as well, basic bill paying has not been something that they've learned. of a bill comes in, identifying when it's due, and then making sure it's paid by that due date. And so just really working on the basics for some people. Casino specifics, things that people don't realize is if they do gamble at the casino, most people have a rewards card because that's how they get their free money that they believe is free from the casino and any perks. And so every time they play at a slot machine or anything like that, they insert the rewards card. But you can also request a win-loss report from the casino based on that card. And it will be, it gives you a very specific printout of amounts put in, amounts taken out, those type of things. And so if they really think that they only spend about maybe $100 a month at the casino, tops, you can have the casino do their win-loss report, and you can look. And sometimes most patients are shocked to learn that maybe they're actually spending, you know, $1,500 a month when they thought it was only $100 on their budget. We encourage patients to be removed from the mailing list at their casinos, Iowa casinos. They also have programs where you're not able to cash checks at the casinos. That one can be a little difficult. I don't know where it's at now, but I have had patients in the past have limits on how much they could write, or maybe not even any, but still have been able to go to some different casinos and use checks. So there are limits that they can work with the casino. The casino does have avenues that they can try to reduce their gambling at the casino. Okay, other things that most people don't really think of or discuss very often is that the individual can actually talk with their financial institution about limiting funds. We have programs in our area here in Dubuque where you can do money makeovers, and the bank will actually work with you on your spending, on savings, checking accounts, all of those type of things. But you can also, if you're working with somebody who does gamble, and whether it's them or their loved one, you can also request a daily cash withdrawal limit to be lowered. And you can work with the bank to pick where you want that to be. And then any bank transactions, you can also request to have double signatures. So if you went into the bank and you wanted to withdraw money, that there would actually have to be two people's signatures, not just your own, in order to withdraw money. So that's something that you can work with your bank and your financial institute, and you can encourage patients or loved ones that there are those tools there through your bank. You can work with doing a debt repayment plan, prioritizing what needs to be paid first. Utilizing the snowball calculator. I don't know if anybody has used the snowball calculator in their personal life, but it's online. You can enter in that you have, $1,500 in credit card debt, and you can plug in your interest rate, and it will tell you how many years it will take you and how much money you will actually end up paying over those years. And so it's kind of nice sometimes. Sometimes, patients will look at just, well, I only pay $12 a month. It's not bad. It's not a hard bill. But if you plug that in and you can show them, well, at $12 a month at your interest rate, you're going to paying that loan for the next 15 years. And this is how much you're going to end up paying in the end. So they can use the snowball calculator just to give themselves an idea. Also, it can work with creditors that need to be contacted. Sometimes people don't know how to even get in contact with them. And if things are getting to the point where they are thinking about needing some pretty severe financial counseling, this might be a time to actually refer them to a reputable financial counselor. Some of our patients get in trouble with some organizations that are not reputable. They're not able to help them, and actually it turns their financial concerns into a nightmare, and they're very, very hard to get out of. And so before any of that happens, of making sure that you are researching what's in your area, We've had patients get conned out of programs out of California that were supposed to have helped them, and nothing ever changed, but they've been paying for years every month for this fee, and they never did anything. So really, you guys would have to do some serious research when you refer them on to a financial counselor. I would start with the bank first, and then they may have people that they could refer you to.
Hey, Allison, would you
Yeah.
speak maybe more specifically to the difference between where they may be having their payroll deposited versus credit card, and the cash withdrawals out of a banking account versus the cash advances they may be taking out off of credit cards?
Okay. The difference?
Well, just that it's something to be aware of. It's not
Oh, absolutely.
necessarily tied to their bank account.
Absolutely. So yes, cash advances on credit cards. And that's something I believe in one of the next slides that we get to when we talked about the family, how family can protect themselves, is making sure that that's no longer an option. Taking that option, working with the creditors to make that no longer an option, the cash advances. Those have like really high interest rates. And basically you're just using your credit card to get cash, which makes your credit balance higher, plus the very high interest rates. But hopefully, if you're working with somebody who is gambling or their loved one, as those are all things throughout the treatment process, hopefully people will get honest about. If their loved one's involved, maybe having their loved one take over all of the credit cards and having them all to themselves so that the individual no longer has one. And working with the credit card companies to find out if they do automatically have to have one for whatever reason, work or whatever reason, that they have a very low limit and no option of cash advances. I don't know if everybody was aware that you could do that, but yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, and I'm blanking, Allison, that I know that there's one banking organization that actually allows an individual, for people who are trying to restore their credit, there's actually a payee type card where it's front loaded and there's extreme limits. And I'm totally blanking. I think we've got the resources out on the IGTP website. But
we do. Okay, sometimes what will happen is you will just have somebody walk in through your doors that says, I need to talk to somebody as my loved one, whether it's their spouse, their child, their family member is the individual who is gambling, and they really need to protect themselves. So what I'm going to talk about is more so for a spouse, but we can use it for any family member that you may share finances with, obviously. One of the first things that we talk with loved ones about is removing your name from any credit cards that they have jointly. If needed, get only ones in your name. This would take the individual contacting the credit card company or their local financial bank, credit union, whatever they use, and identifying that they no longer want their name, and then how they go about that process. Also removing names from joint savings accounts, checking accounts, and setting up your own. It's not saying I'm done, I want nothing to do with you financially. It's literally a way to protect themselves, setting up their own so that they can put their money in and make sure that household bills are being paid. And so that's something that loved ones will have some possible guilt and stress related to, is I don't want them to feel like I don't care what happens to them and I'm taking my money and separating from them. And that's not what we're encouraging. We're encouraging them to protect themselves, because we don't know how bad it's going to get or how bad it actually is right now financially. And so in order to maintain your residence or any of those type of things, that you really need to go and set up your own accounts. And that can be difficult depending on the bank. I personally have had this experience where my bank told me I could not have my own account. I had to have my husband's name on the account because we both had accounts there. And so I was able to go to another bank and say, I want my own account here. So they may have to look at a different bank if that's, or credit union, if that's their bank's policy. Password protect phones, iPads, tablets, all accounts related to money. Encourage them to put passwords that their loved one is not going to guess. So not your child's birthday, not your password for everything that the family uses. But really, because if you are using your phone to do any online banking or paying bills, that's something that people can get into. And so really putting passwords on all of those things. Same thing with a bank debit card. Make sure that the individual does not know the PIN. If they do, speak with the bank about changing it. Opening a separate safe deposit box, storing valuables, jewelry, social security cards for all family members. That one causes a lot of questions with people, but individuals do take out credit in children's names, put a bill in a child's name using their social security card. And so really limiting access to all of those things. Monitoring the mail, throwing away any new credit card and loan offers, refuse to co-sign any loans or any other financial obligations, alert all creditors that extending credit's not an option, inform family members not to lend money, and take over paying all the household bills. I'd say the last one, taking over all the household bills, creates a lot of stress. There are a lot of people who do not want to do that because, as we know, talking about money and handling money is very stressful for people. So that's something that could take a lot of sessions to get the individual ready to do, is to take over all the bills and be responsible for all that and figuring them all out. And I think we just... ask for all of the credit cards and bank cards. They need to give them all to you. Do regular credit reports to ensure nothing's been opened in your name. You can ask the individual to have his or her paycheck deposited into an account with only your name on it and go on a weekly cash budget. That's something we encourage, that if the individual is working on not gambling, then you know how much weekly cash budget. And it's hard. It's a very hard role to take on because it almost becomes like a parenting role, which can cause a lot of relationship issues, which is why we encourage couples to come to treatment together, to each have their own individual counselor here, but also do couples counseling, because if you have to go to your spouse and ask for $25 to run to the grocery store to grab some stuff, and when you return they want to see your receipt, that causes a different dynamic in the relationship. And so you have to be aware of that. And a safe place in treatment with your individual counselor to process it, but also being able to meet as a couple and doing a couple session during treatment to process it and identify that it is related to trust, that it is related to all of the things that have happened. That can be a better way to deal with it. Ask the individual to call creditors to explain the issues and discuss restitution plans. So many times the spouse takes it on that they need to fix it, but you can also ask the person who is gambling to, if they're ready to address it, to call their creditors, explain the issue, and discuss how you're going to pay back some of those bills.
So Allison, Nick put a nice little comment there in the box. I'll go ahead and address it because I think it's maybe a good time to maybe delve into this a little bit. But Nick was asking about the psychology around the gambler's relationship to money, and part of the reason why the gambler had so much trouble with budgeting is because in the real way, money is the drug. So thoughts that you might have to share on that and from your experience?
Absolutely. I would say 100% absolutely. And that's one way when we transitioned our agency to all the counselors working with individuals, whether it's substance abuse or gambling, is sometimes you just have to think about it that way. Think about it that gambling is the drug. If your brain works like that and you can't wrap your head around it, insert whatever substance it is for money, but also recognize that money is everywhere. And so their relationship with money, they're going to have to deal with this in every avenue, whether it's at their job, whether it's paying their bills every day, every week, every month. They really have to work on this relationship that they have with money. And sometimes, you're welcome, Nick, sometimes it's going to be in sessions. And sometimes they're going to come in and they're going to tell you that it didn't work this week. It was awful. You know, maybe they work as a cashier and they are counting money all day and they are triggered and they can tell you that they're triggered. So they might be in sessions for longer. You might have a 90-minute session with somebody who gambles. You might have a 2-hour session with somebody who gambles, because they have to deal with money every day. A lot of gambling, and I know Jerry and Nick both talked about it, but gambling is about money and moving money. And individuals who are gambling are every day thinking about, where am I going to put this money? How am I going to get this money? Where can I move this so nobody sees this? So my wife doesn't see this. I have to get the mail first. I have to deposit this. That's all day long. And really trying to reset their brains on how to deal with money. So absolutely, we have to deal with money every day.
Yeah, and just to follow up to that, Allison, as well, and it goes on, and I think we heard Jerry talk a little bit about that. It's not only all of that, but also maybe could you speak to that gambling then becomes an answer and a solution to all their problems? Absolutely,
because if I could just win, then I won't have any more money problems. That absolutely becomes an issue, because then if they're behind in their bills, then they feel as though if I just went down there and I only spend $40, but I win $1,500, now I'm not behind on my bills. But we all know that that's not the likelihood that's going to happen. But that's that distorted thinking, and really working with individuals to, play that tape all the way through. Because yes, that would be great, but that's probably not going to happen. And what's the consequence if it doesn't happen? And I know we just had another question pop up. Is that right?
Yeah, I think Nick was just adding an additional comment, which is really good, Nick, is that as we talk about how winning can be, the method for saying fixing my problems, but as you point out very well in your note here, is that the research bears out is that that's not how it always usually works out for the problem gambler. They plan to win, but then they never can pocket the winnings because it just escalates.
It keeps going. Absolutely. Okay, next slide, Eric. Okay, things to consider: having a loved one review the finances monthly to help with accountability. Utilizing a bank if a loved one's unable to assist. And it may not be the bank that you use right now. Maybe you have to find one that's willing and offers these services. But if the loved one, if the family member is just absolutely not able to take over the finances or to help with budgeting or any of those things, go to your local bank. See what they can provide for you. Other things to consider are, where does the person who gambles work? Do they have access to money? Are there steps that can be taken to reduce the harms or triggers? Do they have cameras at their place of employment just as a step to reduce? Can they work with somebody in management, or even if they are management, to make sure that they always have a second person with them when they have to handle money? Or can that be delegated to somebody else? We find a lot of individuals who do gamble obviously have jobs, and some of those jobs, they're around money 24/7, and they're the person who has to take it to the bank, or they're the person who has to put it in the safe or count it at the end of the night. And so sometimes it's really about honesty and speaking to somebody at their place of employment and finding out if they can have a safeguard in place, or if they can give that to somebody else to do. And just a reminder that addressing only the financial issues won't stop a gambler's addiction. Compulsive gambling is a disease that usually requires professional treatment. Indeed, traditional financial solutions could actually make matters worse, but the gambler and the gambler's loved ones can take steps to minimize the financial consequences or recover financially from a gambling addiction. somebody is addressing their finances every time that you're meeting with them, and before they leave, you have to find out how they're feeling, if they're having any triggers, talking about money, going over this. If you hold up a sheet and you put all of these numbers in red and explain to somebody, okay, well, you're actually $500,000 in debt. We need to come up with a plan to pay this back. That's going to create a lot of stress for anyone to know that they're that far in debt. So any patient, whether they are gambling or they're using substances, should actually look at their financial picture. They should look at where their debts are, where they're spending their money. A lot of people love to just not know where my credit card bill is or how much I've been turned into collections. And it's easier if I just don't know the answers to those things. But in truly getting healthy, we have to address finances. We have to. Does anybody have any questions? I know I was kind of fast talking there.
So any questions for Allison? I know we've got quite a bit of time for questions. I think we're hoping a little bit for some discussion as we go through this, and certainly can get you on the Iowa Gambling Treatment webpage as well to show you some of these tools that Allison has referenced as we go through this. So you can maybe even get some hands-on with some of this.
Yeah.
So Allison, I may transition because I think
Perfect.
Our next thing was just the questions.
Yeah.
So let me, I'm going to go out to the IGTP website here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay to use a microphone to ask a question? Or?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead, Nick. Thank you.
Allison, thank you for everything you've shared. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to, we already spoke about it, about the anxiety some professionals have with just talking about finances and digging as deep as you're talking about, doing such a good job of an assessment, follow-up work. Could you speak to maybe what's worked for you to reduce your own anxiety and doing financial work, or maybe the way you've helped your counselors learn how to broach the topic? And I wonder if maybe you could give a little more detail with that. That might be helpful, because I've noticed a lot of counselors just kind of feel uncomfortable about it. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably one of the hardest conversations to have. I find that counselors can talk about anything related to any substance use disorder, gambling use disorder, but money is so hard to discuss. And I think it's because we do have a lot of our own, some people have a lot of their own stress and issues when it comes to money. And I think that most people should just be realistic and write down their own stuff and figure out what their own budget is. We cannot expect our patients to give us all of their debt and everything that they spend their money on for a whole entire month and then have us look it over if we've never even done that ourselves. So I encourage anybody to take home the monthly budget, fill it out, or even the self-test, any of those things. Use the snowball calculator, use any of those things. We've all made poor choices financially at some point in our life, and we just have to accept it. But using any of the online tools with patients, start using them with your substance abuse patients as well. We all know that there are patients that come into our agency who are spending their money in ridiculous places, and they can't understand why they can't get out of debt. And so asking them to track it, having them write down what they're spending, not judging. If they choose to use their money on video games, because that's their thing, is video games, not to have a parental discussion with them, but to have okay, well, that was $67 and your light bill was $43. And really, some people don't know how to do that. They don't understand how to look ahead at bills. They mostly deal with what do we have in our hands right now. And so that's a lot of times people will struggle if they get cash, because if you have cash in your pocket, you want to spend it. And most people are like that. And so how do you work with somebody who's never even been into a bank, or who has charges where they're not supposed to have bank accounts? How do you work with those individuals? And so there's a lot of layers, but just becoming, I really like the snowball calculator, yeah. And we use the snapshot. The snapshot's one that we use. that we have them put down all of their creditors. But there are plenty of people, when you ask them what their interest rate is, they don't even know what that means. And so it's a very basic conversation, and you have to be comfortable with that. So, you know, if you don't know, you can ask whoever in your agency, but you have to figure out what interest rates mean, because some patients have never been told, oh, that's a high interest rate. I had no idea. Other people never knew that just because my monthly payment was so small at $12 that you're actually going to be paying, you know, 4 times the amount that that is actually worth. And so putting some of that down, this one is how to pay your monthly bills. It's a simple one. It's using envelopes. It's getting the bill. It's putting it in an envelope. It's putting it on your calendar. It's doing any of those type of things, and then actually paying that bill when it's due. And it seems like it's something that's very simple for a lot of people, but there's a lot of people who don't do this whatsoever. So this is one that I like as well. And then the snapshot, your average month down, if you go down to the snapshot, yes, that one. This is one that we have every one of our individuals who gamble complete, so that we can look at on a monthly average of kind of where the finances, where it's going. And so it has a whole bunch of stuff. Now, some of it may not apply and other things may. You may look at this and find out that they are paying $300 for their cell phone a month. That seems like a lot. Are there things in the area that could help them reduce that? If it's because they're just using data to be online or streaming videos or whatever, what would it cost to get Wi-Fi where they live versus $300 a month in their phone? And so just thinking outside of the box with them and kind of tracking that and seeing if there's anything that we could cut. Or if it's because they eat every meal out. Is it because they may get up and go to work, but every day at lunch they go to lunch and they eat out, and then every night they also grab food and they eat out? Could it be something where maybe they only eat out once? Is that something they'd be willing to do? So I like that one. And the self-test, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a question that came in from Dave Ekman. And I know Jerry touched a little bit this, and maybe Nick, you can speak to this as well, because I know you have some experience with this. But the question was, can you tell us about the use of medications to curb obsessive thoughts about money and gambling?
I think Jerry had talked about that. Is Jerry on today? Do we know?
Yeah, no, Jerry is not on today. I know he had referenced, and Nick, I never say it right, but it's, you know, there is a supplement that's available that has been shown to be helpful with this. But again, most of this is then the conversations really that need to happen either with their primary care physician or with their pharmacist, because there is no FDA approved indication for any medication to assist with this type of question, Dave. But certainly you could reach out to Jerry or to Nick Foss. I know that they've had some experience with working some over-the-counter supplements that have been found in research that maybe.
Eric, do you, the only go ahead. There are really only 3 things that you'll find in the literature that have even been explored, and the literature is so scant on them that, first of all, as Eric said, you have to approach it with caution. And in second place, you must consult the primary care physician. But bupropion has been researched with gamblers to reduce cravings. And they kind of found that out because they would have smokers that they were obviously applying bupropion to that happened to be gamblers, and would notice that they weren't gambling as much, that their cravings were reducing. Same thing, they've ran some trials with naltrexone with gambling, reduce cravings. Very few studies, but theoretically, they're just basing that off of the idea that the same mechanism that the brain uses to process pleasure from the opioids is there with the gambling. But again, very small studies. And the last one is an over-the-counter supplement is N-acetylcysteine, which is sold as NAC in most health food stores, and is just a amino acid, and that's been done in a few studies by Dr. John Grant and a few other researchers, and it's again, very small studies, but is supposed to help gamblers reduce their cravings to gamble. You just have to be careful with any single one of those, because there are obvious repercussions for them, especially naltrexone with the liver. N-acetylcysteine is a sulfur-based amino acid, so if they have a sulfur allergy or they have other kind of heart medication, so you just have to make sure you consult with that, but nothing is FDA approved yet.
Mhm.
Anecdotal.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. I always get NAC. It comes out of my mouth really funny. So appreciate you jumping in on that.
Well, I would say if they have any medical conditions at all, to be consulting with their primary care physician as well.
Allison, you're going to take a look at another one of these tools.
Okay.
Which one was it that you wanted to take a look
at? The self-test. This is the one that I had asked staff at our agency to use with any patient during treatment, because it gives you just a little snapshot about what's going on. Doesn't have to be gambling patients only, but just, I'm behind on my rent or mortgage, I'm behind on my utility payments, I'm behind on payments for loans, a creditor's taking action against me. Because if we don't ask those questions, they're not going to share those with us. So you should really address finances. If we're working with an individual and we want them to be healthy in all aspects of their life, we can't leave out finances. We absolutely cannot. So that's one that I like to use for every patient.
Yeah. And Allison, talk a little bit more about why you're using it for every patient.
Because patients that come through our agency, even substance use patients, this is a big stressor for them. This could be a way that the reason that they are doing what they're doing, whether they are using, whether they're selling drugs, whether they're stealing, whatever it may be, finances can be a big part of that. And so finding out where they're at financially can help if we want to work on some of the stress in their life. It's not going to fix all their problems, but having them take a look at it and developing a plan, there's no reason we shouldn't be doing that. We're doing a great job. We talk with primary care physicians, we talk with mental health professionals, we talk with family members, but we need to talk with the patient about stress and their finances, because this is the number one financial concern, stressor for everybody is finances. So if you have finances in your own personal life, imagine what your patients have with all of the stress in their life. That's why I think everybody should deal with it.
Yeah. And there's also a backdoor reason for it, and I know I've had this conversation with other counselors throughout the system, is having the conversation about finances with those that have come in for a substance use disorder is a backdoor way for them to start talking about their gambling.
Yep, it's a way to find out if they're spending their money. If they're like, well, yeah, but I'm only behind my rent because I lost Saturday night at the casino. Well, hello, maybe we need to have a further conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Allison, did you want to walk them through either of these other two guides that you've referenced?
I used both of those guides for this PowerPoint. They're great. This one specifically that you have pulled up, it will tell you it on every page, because this is for you as the professional. But when you're in it, it will say, reminder, this can be a trigger, and talking about this can not be a great thing. Like, you have to be ready to have these conversations when you're going through it. So it's a great guide to use, just of how to use, right there, caution. It'll say caution. Once that they are, they've stopped gambling. So there'll be little cautions while you're going through it, so that you don't just jump in and start talking about everything. But it gives you plenty of examples. It gives you the language that you might want to use when asking about finances, some scenarios, things that you might not have thought about. So like phones, obviously it starts talking about the phones.
Yeah, so just knowing that that's a tool, let me bring up the other one here real quick.
And the other, it's loved ones.
Loved ones. Sort of,
and that'll have some of the how to protect yourself and keep yourself safe financially, making a plan of action, understanding what gambling is, but also understanding that how do you take over some of the main roles of being the primary financial person in the household.
So those resources, all these resources are available here. There's a few others in here. There's one actually from Singapore that's interesting to look at. I don't know, Allison, whether you've used that one or not. I was looking at that one a little bit more. But, you know, the financial tools, the reason we've got these here, and I'll be honest, that, you know, these are ones that we've, over the years, have sort of vetted. It doesn't mean that it's all of them that are available. So certainly if you stumble across or find something that you think would be of value and for the network to use, certainly send that along to the IPN email box. We'd be happy to take a look and vet it. And if it looks good, we can put it out here for others also to use. And it is, when you look at Iowa code, and actually, well, not going to be easy for me to go find it and put, well, hold on a second. So there's very limited information in the Iowa code. Let me bring I need to bring up a window here. So let me bring it over here. And what I wanted to show you is, where's my gambling folder? So when you look at Iowa gambling, it's chapter 135. It's, of course, it opens up on my other screen, so I'll bring it over here. This is, when you look at gambling treatment outside of what's in the licensure standards, this is all else that's in gambling in the code. And the only reason that I wanted to bring it up for you is that, the department shall operate a gambling treatment program to provide programs which may include, but are not limited to, outpatient and follow-up treatment of persons affected by gambling, rehabilitation, residential, etc., crisis call, education prevention service, and financial management and credit counseling services. So it specifically calls out in the Iowa code that these are services that are to be provided to the family affected by problem gambling. So, and then the rest of it is basically saying you have to be licensed to provide those services as a provider in the state of Iowa. So anyway, that's the reference in Iowa code. That's in the RFP, that's in the language here, and why we're spending particular time here, because the financial dimension to what goes on with the problem with the gambling, it is huge. It is the barrier that deserves a good amount of attention, but it also, you have to know your stuff. You have to know the tools, and in that, using your best motivational interviewing skills to help get a sense of where the problem lies, and using some of these tools here to get a sense of what is that plan that could potentially develop. And Allison, maybe you can speak a little bit to that, sort of guiding them a little bit as they, in the treatment planning of, what does that actually look like? And, what are maybe some of those small baby steps to be taken to assist them?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be different for everybody, and it's going to be different if they are the person who gambles or if they're the loved one. But across the board, if you take anything away from this, across the board, anybody who comes in that identifies gambling, you have to have a financial goal, problem, goal, and objective on their treatment plan. 100% has to be there in order to just be in compliance with the RFP, I would say. So it has to be there. What it's going to look like for them, it may be something totally different. You may have one patient who wants to address saving more money by gambling less. They don't want to stop gambling, but just gambling less. And so your treatment plan would be very specific, that is their goal, is they want to save more money by gambling less. And how are they going to do that? They are going to reduce gambling from $100 to $50 a week. And then how are they going to do that? Are they going to no longer take their ATM cards with them to casino? Are they going to speak to the casino about reducing how much money they can get, and being very specific on the steps that they can take? So treatment plans for me should be very individualized. I know that if you're using IWITs and you're using the recovery domains, that they have very cookie cutter gambling treatment plans that you can use, but it should be very individualized. The person sitting in front of you probably is not going to have the exact same needs that are in IWITs that have been just a standard goal. So make it very specific. I don't find that any treatment plan can be too specific. So yeah, whether that's, I'm only going to go to the casino one time this week and I'm only going to spend $50. When I get to $50, I'm going to leave. They come back next week. How did it go? It didn't go well. Okay, so maybe we need to tweak this one a little bit. Start small. If they want to start small with, they will just open their mail, or they will just identify where most of their money goes. Sometimes people don't even know how much they make when you're working with individuals, not just gamblers. People in general may not know how much they make, because they may have direct deposit and they never go online to check how much it is. And so maybe that may be where you start, is identifying how much you even make every single week. So does that answer your question, Eric?
Yeah, no, I think that was helpful.
Okay.
And I was going to just, if there aren't any other questions, I know we've got quite a few other folks that have been doing this for a while that are on the call today. I don't know if you guys want to chime in on anything that you've experienced that have been helpful in working with the patients that have come in for issues related to their gambling, and how you've maneuvered through the minefield of their finances. And if you want to jump in, just remember to unmute yourself. I don't want to unmute everyone because it'll get really noisy.
Hey, Eric, this is Nicholas again.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Probably talking a little bit too much, but as usual, when I was at a national conference, Mike Brubacher, who is one of the pioneers in the field of problem gambling counseling, he told me, he said, one of the first things I do is a budget with my clients. Is almost with his and he treated problem gamblers, and himself being in recovery from gambling disorder, said that was essentially the very first thing he did. And I found that I use those FAR financial worksheets as well that Allison showed, and I think they really do work well to point out some of the pain points, and making sure that you pay attention to the emotional reactions you get from the gambler with the finances. Because once you uncover some of this stuff that they've really tried to avoid probably for years or for a long time, some of them feel like gambling is as Allison already pointed out, it's a solution to a lot of their problems. So you need to make sure you have a good relapse prevention plan early on, so they know how to handle that when you're doing the early financial work, because they get really triggered by looking at how much they have to pay back. And it's daunting. It's kind of the same thing with substance use disorder, when people think about their life with no more drugs and no more alcohol, or, early on it's just overwhelming, and it can be that way for the gamblers. Just making sure you're very attentive to their reactions to when you're doing that early financial work, and teaching them how to cope with the anxieties and the stress of looking at that. And that's just something I've noticed that needed to be done early on.
No, Nick, and I'll chime in too on anytime that across addiction, anytime that you are telling someone to reduce or stop the behaviors that are causing the addiction or attributing to the addiction-related problems, you are taking a part of their soul away from them. And so we have to be very mindful of what are the things that we're helping them to replace what we are taking away from them. And when in the context, and I'm preaching to the choir here because all of you are in some way, shape, or form working with in substance use disorder or on the problem gambling side, is you know, what are the other things that we're going to be working with them to replace that which we are asking them to remove from their life. In some cases, they've spent decades building a relationship that's about this drug, whether it's gambling or whether it's a substance. And to tell them to walk away, you're asking them to say goodbye to their closest friend. And I know that keeps it very simple. And I think, but you can never underestimate what the necessity to have that proactive relapse kind of conditional, helping them to condition themselves, because they will, even without thinking about it, put themselves in harm's way.
Last thought I have about the finances is, in my experience, gamblers have, some of the gamblers have been very, I say very, but have been relatively finance illiterate. But there were a number of the gamblers that I've had that have been very aware of their financial behaviors, and they get a high from moving that money around, changing bank accounts, check to cash, credit cards. They're really, really aware, and just knowing how important then it is to do this financial work. And Allison did a really good job of talking about the family dynamic, because you don't have the family involved, it can be very difficult to get an accurate picture, because one of the first thing a person with a substance use disorder or gambling disorder is going to do is they're going to lie to you, and it's very easy for them to lie. So, you know, having the family involved for them to be able to at least, you know, once a month to have them in there with you to say, yep, you know, this is what's going on with the finances. And you can really do harm reduction work there too. If you actually have that, you know, if the gambler isn't in a place, you know, in the stage of change where they're going to abstain, you can do harm reduction work by keeping track of those finances and noticing, okay, so, you know, we started out spending $1,000 a month and now you're spending $500 a month. So we're, you know, making progress. Anyway, it's just really crucial, because that relationship to the gambling is to the money is so disordered. The way that they think about the money is in the same way that another person with a substance use disorder thinks about the drug or the substances. They have that fascination and fantasy that's all around that.
Thanks again for the comments. All good insights, Nick. Thank you. Anyone else? Or questions for Allison? Allison, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I would just say that if you do come across any questions that you have, if you're an agency that this is your first time you're going to be working with anybody that gambles, you can shoot me an email anytime, whether it's related to finances, the process, or how to do iSmart, iWits, any of those type of things, because we've been doing it for a long time.
Also, I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll out there for CEUs. For those, I know we're getting done a little bit early. I don't know that anyone will complain, but we'll go ahead and put that out there. We'll leave the poll open for the next couple of minutes so everyone can chime in on that. If you're not seeing the poll, I know for some reasons in some browsers the poll does not show. Please just put something, send us through a chat. Just make sure you put your name, email address, and organization on there. For those locales where you may have more than one person listening to the webinar today, please do the same. Just go ahead and send something through chat and with the name of each individual and email address and the organization. And I'll make sure I get those on the list.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and again, I apologize for some of you can't see the poll, and some of you are putting responding very nicely in the chat. So I will go ahead and keep both everything. I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and close this out for the day.
Sure.
And for those of you who need to stay on board, again, Allison, I want to just thank you. Great job. Seeing some great comments from the work today. And as Allison said, and her contact information is, feel free to reach out to her. um, for comments or suggestions or tools. We are better together, and so this is just a great effort. And as a reminder, our last and final, and well, it won't be our final, but the last one in this series, as far as the webinars, will be on March 20th. I believe it's at noon, which is, I think, a Wednesday, if I look on my calendar correctly. Yeah. And so hopefully we will see many of you again back there. Jerry will be talking about the gambling trends that we're seeing. And with that, and the other thing, just to let you know, while people are still hanging on, I know we've had a couple of people have left, but I want to go back to here, just so that you're aware. I'm posting some of the things on the training site here too, but I want you to be aware of where the IPN, the Integrated Provider Network folder is. So it's at the idph.iowa.gov substance abuse. Then you'll see this Integrated Provider Network link here. And within that, you will see meetings and trainings. And this is where you will see under the treatment where we are posting all the webinars. So we've got the first 4 posted. We'll certainly get Allison's posted here by the end of the week. So just to let you know, and you can download the handouts here as well. So with that, I'll thank Allison. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and we'll see everyone on the 20th. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Eric.